The banana in your kitchen is one of the cheapest things in any grocery store. Less than $1 a pound. Cheaper than a bottle of water. That price is not a miracle. It is a crime scene. It is the result of a century-long corporate cartel, private mercenary armies, orchestrated massacres, and a secret alliance with the CIA that literally overthrew democratically elected governments. The history of the world's most popular fruit isn't a story about agriculture. It is a story about a corporate mafia. And the strangest part? The system they built to guarantee absolute, uninterrupted corporate profit was so profoundly greedy that it accidentally engineered a biological ticking time bomb. One that is, at this very moment, quietly preparing to wipe the banana off the face of the earth. To understand how a yellow fruit became the most dangerous commodity in the world, you have to look past the grocery store shelf, back to a time when a single corporation possessed more power than the nations it occupied. This is the story of the banana mafia, and it begins with a problem hidden inside the dirt of Central America. In the late 1800s, bananas were an exotic luxury in the West. If you were an American living in New York, a banana was a rare, expensive treat you bought at a high-end market. They were difficult to transport. They rotted too quickly, and the shipping lanes were too slow. Then came a man named Miner Keith. The railroad project he was building through the jungles of Costa Rica was a disaster. Thousands of workers died. Keith nearly went bankrupt, and to salvage the investment, he planted bananas along the tracks. When the railroad was finished, he discovered something unexpected. The trains weren't making money moving passengers. They were making a fortune moving bananas. In 1899, Keith merged his business with a rival importer to create a brand new entity, the United Fruit Company. You probably know them today by their modern, friendly rebranding, Chiquita. But a century ago, the United Fruit Company was anything but friendly. They realized that Americans had developed an insatiable, addictive appetite for this cheap tropical fruit. And in capitalism, when demand skyrockets, the only way to maximize your profit is to completely control the supply. United Fruit didn't just want to sell bananas. They wanted to own every step of the journey from plantation to grocery store. Within a few decades, United Fruit had bought up millions of acres of land across Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica, and Colombia. They became the largest landowner in the region. But they faced a massive obstacle. Land costs money. Taxes eat into profits. Labor laws, minimum wages, and worker safety regulations make products more expensive to produce. If United Fruit followed the laws of the countries they operated in, the banana would become an expensive luxury again, and corporate growth would stall. So, they made a decision. If the laws of a country are bad for your business, you don't follow them. You change the government. This is the exact historical moment where a slang term we still use today was born. The Banana Republic. Today, Banana Republic sounds like a joke. Originally, it described a sovereign country whose government existed primarily to serve a foreign fruit company. United Fruit perfected the playbook. They would approach a local dictator or a corrupt politician and strike a deal. The corporation would build the country's infrastructure, their railroads, telegraph lines, and ports, for free. In exchange, the government would grant United Fruit massive tracts of land completely tax-free for 99 years. In Honduras, United Fruit controlled so much of the infrastructure that the country's own national mail system was carried on corporate trains. The government couldn't even send a letter without the permission of a fruit company. When politicians refused to play along, United Fruit simply replaced them. In 1911, the president of Honduras, Miguel Davila, threatened to regulate the foreign fruit companies and protect local farmers. In response, an American banana exporter named Sam Zamuri hired a private army of mercenaries, bought a surplus U.S. Navy warship, sailed to Honduras, overthrew the president, and installed a puppet dictator who immediately granted the banana companies total tax immunity. Pause for a second and appreciate how deeply bizarre that is. A private corporate entity launched a literal military invasion of a sovereign country, just to avoid paying taxes on fruit. And it worked. It worked so well that for the next 40 years, United Fruit operated with absolute unchecked impunity. If workers went on strike demanding a weekend off or a living wage, United Fruit didn't negotiate. In 1928, when banana workers in Colombia struck for better conditions, The United Fruit Company pressured the U.S. government to intervene. The Colombian government, terrified of a U.S. military invasion, sent its own army to the town of Ciénaga. The soldiers set up machine guns on the roofs overlooking the town square, where the striking workers had gathered, and they opened fire. The exact death toll of the banana massacre is still hidden, but estimates range from several hundred to several thousand people, all killed to ensure that the cost of shipping a banana to New Orleans didn't go up by a fraction of a cent. For decades, this bloody status quo kept the market stable, the investors happy, and the grocery store shelves stocked. Then came 1951, and United Fruit ran into an enemy they couldn't just shoot down in a town square: democracy. In 1951, the people of Guatemala democratically elected a new president named Jacobo Arbenz. Arbenz looked around his country and saw a deeply broken system. The United Fruit Company owned over 400,000 acres of Guatemalan land, and deliberately left most of it unused to keep competitors out. Meanwhile, millions of Guatemalans remained landless and poor. Arbenz passed a land reform law to buy back the unused land and redistribute it to poor farming families. He offered to pay United Fruit the exact value of the property. But here's the twist, and it is a masterclass in corporate irony. To avoid paying property taxes for decades, United Fruit had consistently lied to the Guatemalan government about how much their land was worth, claiming it was practically worthless. So when Arbenz offered to buy it back at their own declared tax value, United Fruit fell into their own trap. They couldn't accept without losing their empire for pennies, and they couldn't admit the land was worth millions without exposing their own massive fraud. United Fruit refused to compromise. Instead, they launched one of the most deceptive propaganda campaigns in human history. They hired Edward Bernays, the father of modern propaganda. Instead of telling the American public that they were fighting land reforms, they resorted to the single most powerful tool in their arsenal, the Red Scare, and convinced them that they were fighting communism. They flooded U.S. newspapers with fabricated reports claiming Guatemala was becoming a Soviet satellite state. The campaign reached the highest levels of the United States government. The U.S. Secretary of State at the time was John Foster Dulles. His brother, Allen Dulles, was the director of the CIA. Both of them had previously worked as corporate lawyers for the law firm that represented, you guessed it, the United Fruit Company. In 1954, under the direct orders of President Dwight D. Eisenhower, the CIA launched Operation PB Success. They funded and armed a mercenary army. They launched a psychological warfare campaign. They bombed Guatemala's capital. Then they overthrew the democratically elected government and installed a military dictator. The very first thing the new dictator did was cancel the land reform, return the property to United Fruit, and strip the voting rights of the majority of the Guatemalan population. The corporate profits were saved. The 60-cent banana survived. But the victory hidden inside that boardroom coup contained the seeds of a catastrophe that no amount of political corruption could fix. Because while United Fruit was busy playing geopolitical chess, nature was playing by a completely different set of rules. To make their global empire as profitable as possible, the banana mafia had engineered a fatal biological flaw into their entire supply chain. They had optimized for total uniformity. In nature, genetic diversity is a survival mechanism. United Fruit hated diversity. They wanted every banana to look, taste, and ripen exactly the same. So they chose one single variety of banana, the Gros Michel, or Big Mike. And they didn't grow them from seeds. They grew them from clones. Every single Gros Michel banana tree on Earth was an exact genetic carbon copy of the one next to it. For miles and miles across Central America, there was no genetic variation. Every tree was genetically identical, which meant a fungus that could kill one banana could kill all of them. In the 1950s, that exact horror movie script came to life. A soil fungus called Panama disease began to spread through the plantations. It was a biological wildfire. The fungus choked the roots, withered the leaves, and turned the soil into a toxic wasteland. Within a few years, the Gros Michel, the banana that built the United Fruit Empire, the banana your grandparents grew up eating, was functionally wiped off the face of the earth. The industry faced total annihilation. They scrambled, poured millions into research, and finally found a replacement banana that was naturally immune to that specific strain of the fungus. The Cavendish. The Cavendish didn't taste as good as the Big Mike, and it bruised much easier, but it survived the fungus. The industry was saved, and the world transitioned to the modern banana we see in stores today. But the banana mafia learned absolutely nothing from the crisis. Instead of abandoning the dangerous monoculture model, they doubled down. They planted the Cavendish exactly the same way, cloned, identical, covering millions of acres of land with zero genetic diversity. And history, as it always does when humans refuse to learn, is repeating itself. Right now, a new mutated strain of the soil fungus, known as Tropical Race 4, or TR4, is sweeping across the globe. It has already devastated plantations in Asia, the Middle East, and Africa, and recently it officially arrived in Latin America. The Cavendish banana has absolutely no defense against it. There is no chemical spray that can kill it, and no soil treatment that can stop it. The clock is ticking on the modern banana. We like to look at the modern world and imagine that our technology, our economy, and our global supply chains exist to deliver the best possible life to humanity at the lowest possible cost. But when you pull back the curtain on the most ordinary item in your kitchen, you realize the truth is far more unsettling. We overthrew democracies, enslaved economies, and stained the soil of Central America with blood, just to keep a piece of fruit artificially cheap enough to prevent an investor from panicking on a Tuesday morning. We engineered a biological crisis in our food supply because treating nature like an identical, copy-pasted factory line was more profitable than respecting its diversity. The ancient world built monuments meant to withstand the test of time. The modern world manufactured a system so fragile that it can be brought down by a single microscopic fungus in the dirt. So, the next time you walk down the grocery aisle and look at that bright yellow bunch of bananas, take a second to look past the price tag, because the true cost of that 60-cent fruit was never paid at the cash register. It was paid in history. It was paid in blood. And in the end, the thing that may destroy the banana wasn't a rival corporation, a revolution, or a government. It was a fungus.